Welcome, everyone, to the special campus reform interview. I'm your host, Professor Nick Giordano. I have a great guest, but before I bring on the guest, make sure to visit Campus Reform at campusreform.org. Also, follow Campus Reform at Campus Reform everywhere. Now, I would like to welcome today's guest, and I want to introduce Riley Gaines. Riley, the director of the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute. She's embarking on the Speak Louder campus tour, which is sponsored by the Leadership Institute. Riley, welcome to the program. I'm glad you could join me. How are you today?
I am doing wonderful, Nicholas. Thank you so much for having me on.
So let the audience know what's the tour going to be about, the Speak Louder campus tour. What do you intend to engage in, with the student body and explain to them?
Yeah, well, I'm super excited. The Leadership Institute, specifically the Riley Gaines Center, has sponsored this tour. And what this tour is, in the spring semester, I will be speaking at 25 different colleges. Of course, colleges all over the country in the South, typically, your right-leaning states, and also in your blue-leaning states like New York and like California. I did this last fall. And let me tell you, it was incredible. And really, it was revitalizing for me. I think it's very easy to see what's going on around the country, whether that's, as it pertains to crime or, our border, the national security issue at our border, drugs, inflation, the list goes on, especially, these cultural issues that seem to be plaguing corporate America and academia, unfortunately. I think it's very easy to see all of that and get pretty down and feel pretty hopeless. What can we do to restore America? Is there anything we can do? But speaking on college campuses last fall, and will continue into the spring, really, I felt revitalized and it gave me hope.
Well, I want to
25
piggyback on that for a second
Yeah,
because
please.
since you've engaged on the college campuses, two things. Now, obviously, we know that sometimes it could be a very hostile environment to certain types of speakers. And you certainly, in some colleges, weren't greeted all that well by the student body and the academic leadership at these institutions. And that's what I want to touch on. When you go to the college campuses, do you find that the student body, I'm not talking about the far left loons, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about just the general student body that comes to hear you speak. Do you find that they're more open-minded and tolerant than a lot of professors on campus and administrators that may be protesting your speech and your arrival?
Absolutely, I do. And let me tell you, the people who attend my events on these college campuses, it's not limited just to staunch Republicans. Really, these are garnering people all across the political aisle, the political spectrum, which is pretty powerful, But the issue that I talk about, men infiltrating into women's sports and taking away our equal opportunities and our rights to privacy and safety in sports, but really the broader picture of the gender ideology movement as a whole, that is something that the overwhelming majority of the general public, even among the younger demographic, that's something we all agree on. I shouldn't say we all, but recent polls show over 70%. And you and I both know there's not a lot of political issues, which unfortunately this has turned into a political issue. There's not that many political issues that large of a percentage agrees upon. So yes, I certainly believe that these students and community members, they're hungry to hear the truth that they have for so long now been denied by these professors and by these administrators. So absolutely, I like you said, there are definitely times when the protest is loud and in your face, but that's not representative of the amount of people on these college campuses who do care and do agree on these issues that I spend my time talking about and advocating for.
Yeah, I've been in the classroom for a long time, and I think that sometimes people underestimate how open-minded a younger generation is. And sure, they certainly have their problems, don't get me wrong, but they are open-minded. A lot of them are willing to hear. It's just that you have the totalitarians that have the loudest voices that would like to shut people like you down. Now, are there efforts on college campuses to shut you down from doing the Speak Louder campus tour?
Always. Just last year alone, I was canceled from Penn State University, I think 3 or 4 other universities. University of New Mexico, there was some trouble there. Yes. But again, it's by these administrators. Even now, for preparing for the spring semester, some of these student-led groups who are hosting me have been advertising on Facebook and Instagram and different things, to which Meta, that of course runs Facebook and Instagram, has taken off their ads for hate speech because I'm very, very scary, right? Boo. So yeah, I find myself running into just a lot of hoops and hurdles you have to jump through to merely share the message, the very simple message that men and women are different and that we deserve to be celebrated and honored and recognized on our own physical ceilings, especially again in sports. It's mind-blowing. It's actually pretty unfathomable that has become a controversial statement. Speaking to my own personal experience, right? Like, I'm 23 years old, a recent college graduate myself, and I have to spend my time going to DC, sitting in front of Congress to explain to them that men and women are different, and then to be on the other end of that and have them be confused by this explanation. Congress, which is supposed to be, I mean, which is the beating heart of the American Republic. So yeah, it's lots of hoops and hurdles to share a very simple but necessary and urgent message.
Now, I have to ask you, your senior year of high school, when you were filling out your college applications and you were deciding on where to go to school, did you ever think that just 4 or 5 years later, that here you would be talking about this issue, going on a college campus tour throughout the country to speak to something that should just seem so common sense, so rational, so normal, biological reality that has become so controversial? Did you ever imagine that that's what it would turn out to be?
No, for a couple of reasons. One of which, I was never prepared for this, really. I am kind of ashamed to admit it. I didn't have to take any sort of government courses. I knew virtually nothing about our civil process. Again, ashamedly, I only knew that we had 3 branches of government.
Don't worry, my semester just started, and I have had 2 out of 200 students pass the citizenship exam. So you're not alone.
Well, yeah, well, I truthfully, and I don't think it's, necessarily to any fault of my own, but we just weren't taught it. So yeah, I never could have prepared, nor was I, by any means a public speaker. My face turned the color of a tomato when I had to speak in front of people. I was set to be a dentist, actually, is what I had graduated. I got my degree in human health sciences and health law. I'd already put my deposit down for dental school, accepted my seat, scored in the top percentile of the DAT, and was ready to pursue that. That was my career path. I set back in middle school, that was the goal I had set for myself. Of course, working all 4 years of college, extra hard to achieve this goal. But now here we are. And secondly, I wouldn't have ever imagined I would be in this position because I never would have thought this would be a position that had to be had. It kind of cracks me up because, it's almost objectively funny when you think about it, because just in terms of the impact that's been had and the following now that I have throughout, my different social media platforms, to have over 1.5 million followers for simply saying men and women are different. It's crazy. It's mind blowing. And again, it's comical. It's almost like a Babylon Bee headline or like a South Park episode or Saturday Night Live skit, but it's real life with real consequences.
Yeah, and I think that is true. When you look at it, it's almost as if women fought so hard for so long to get equal rights to men. They fought to have their own sports leagues and to compete within society, only to see males dominating it once again in every aspect, including their own female sports, including female beauty pageants. We really have jumped off the deep end when you think about it. Now, with the campus tour, what are you hoping to accomplish as you go and speak to students on college campuses?
Well, the slogan of last fall's campus tour was to speak louder. And of course, the objective there is to empower and encourage and embolden young people to stand for the truth. Because I know what I went through, competing my senior year at University of Kentucky at our national championships against a man who was very clearly a man. He wasn't fooling anyone, and he was very mediocre when actually competing against the men the 3 years prior. What we went through as Division I swimmers is not unique. What I'm realizing is almost everyone I come into contact with has some sort of experience with this gender ideology movement impacting them adversely, whether that's man or woman or child or adult, regardless of what race you are. I mean, no one is immune from this issue, is what I'm saying. And so last semester, we spoke at University of Wyoming, where these girls, this Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority, allowed a man into their sorority house, which is tragic, really, because, I mean, if you think about it, these girls were promised sisterhood and got the brother they never wanted. You know, I talk to people on college campuses who have been failed. They've had assignments failed by professors for using words that reinforce cis heteronormativity, whatever that even means. I mean, everyone that I have come into contact with, a very large portion of the people that I come into contact with, especially students, have been impacted by this movement. So just encouraging them and administrators and staff to be unwavering in their values that represent what is right and what is true and what is fair and what is just.
And if your opponents succeed at redefining what men and women are and what type of sports people could compete in, and that there's really no boundaries, that we're all supposed to be quote unquote the same, which we're not. But if they could accomplish their goal of normalizing that in society, what do you think the result is going to be?
Well, I totally agree with you. If we are to deny the most basic of truths, which is man and woman, there is no limits. We have to be asking ourselves, you know, okay, what's next? Outsider, I guess, looking in, if you didn't live in the US and you just had a very basic understanding of what it means once you start to deny objective truth, stemming from the very tippy top. I mean, look at civilizations like North Korea or China or Russia or Germany or Cuba or Venezuela or Brazil, or these countries or civilizations that embrace these Marxist regimes. That's where we're headed, which is a pretty chilling thought, to be honest. And it sounds kind of like doomsday and you know, conspiracy, but it's really not. Read 1984 and see what happens when people start saying 2 + 2 is 5. And that's the point where we're at in this country right now. So yeah, what's the next thing? Are we going to start denying age? Are we going to start denying worth? Because I would love to identify as a millionaire and suddenly have $1 million in my bank account. Are we going to start
I'd agree with you
denying
there.
race or ethnicity? Yeah, it's just the options are limitless of what we're going to be asked to do next if we allow this to continue, which, as we said, it's virtually infiltrated into every realm. In corporate America, we have companies taking a stance and enforcing these DEI initiatives, of course, in academia, in the media, in our government, in churches even. We've seen churches who have been split, whole denominations who have been split, which is just, we've reached a precipice, I think, where people have to ask themselves, will I call this out or will I be complicit? And I think those who are silent are just as complicit as those who are enforcing and creating these guidelines and policies.
You know, that's such a good point. The fact is that you decided to speak out, and it was unpopular. I mean, you're going against the mob. And while they may not be in the majority, they're not even close to the majority. As a matter of fact, they're a fringe minority. They are the loudest voices, and they are intimidating. What gave you the courage not only to speak out, but to continue to speak out? Because a lot of people would have just, the second they faced the blowback, they would have just sunk away and went quietly into the night. But you have decided, you know what? You're going into the belly of the beast. You're going on college campuses. What gives you the courage and motivation to continue to go out there?
A couple things. One, and really most importantly, is my faith. That's certainly what has kept me grounded and really propagated me forward. Just knowing the fact that we already know who wins the overall war. actually, correction, we already know who has won the overall war of what we're seeing. This is just one battle of a much broader war, and we know who's won that war. So that is really what gives me reassurance and allows me to do this with a smile on my face and very lighthearted. Secondly, I think about my younger sister, who's 15 years old. She's an incredible gymnast who will go on to compete at the collegiate level. I think about her and her opportunities, and I shudder at the thought of her having to share a locker room with a man. I've been married a year and a half. I can only hope to have a daughter of my own one day. That's who we're fighting for. I think of the women who came before me, who fought relentlessly back in the 1960s and 1970s for Title IX, so I could enjoy and benefit from the opportunities that I had. That's who we're fighting for. I'm very fortunate and blessed to have an incredible support wheel around me of family and friends, my coaches, my athletic director at my university, all these
The
people
Leadership
around me.
Institute.
Yes, the Leadership Institute, who again, just provide encouragement and support. That is crucial, and I've felt that support, and it keeps me going forward.
And I think that's important. And why do you think? Because I know what it's like, right? So I'm a college professor. I obviously lean more to the conservative side of the spectrum. And I'm constantly getting emails from other professors. Thanks for speaking out. Thanks for doing what you're doing. And I'm sitting there like, you got a voice too. You could use it, because if we all speak out, we can actually stop this nonsense. How much support do you receive behind the scenes that never gets told in the public? Nobody gets to see it, of people coming out thanking you, but yet they're deathly afraid. They're petrified to speak out themselves.
All the time, especially initially, a year ago. I still have world-renowned athletes, both male and female, who everyone knows, who message me privately and say, thank you for doing this. I can't speak out because I have sponsorships and endorsements, and I'm still playing, I'm still, competing. So I can't risk my opportunities, but you keep taking the arrows. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And at first, truthfully, I felt pretty humbled by this. I felt pretty honored. But like I said, I began to realize that those who are silent are just as complicit. And I don't have a ton of sympathy anymore, because we're at the point where we have to make sacrifices for the greater good of not just female athletes, but the greater good of society. Because like I said, this issue extends beyond, it transcends beyond just women's sports. But like I said, a year ago, it was a lot more prevalent, these private thanks and messages of gratitude. It was a lot more prevalent a year ago, which shows me that the tide is turning and that people are becoming, parents, coaches, medical professionals. I mean, these people are becoming more emboldened, which is hopeful. I think it's only a matter of time before sanity and truth prevail. They always do. It's kind of just, how long do we have to endure this in the meantime? But those people who are willing to speak out certainly expedite the process of how long we have to deal with this lunacy.
Yeah, and there's always a reason to remain silent. I tell my students that, like, when are you going to push back? And not on any political issue, just whatever your belief system is. You could do what the professor wants you to do because you need the A. You can't speak out because you can't fail the class. Well, sooner or later, you're going to need a job, so you can't speak out then. Then you're going to need promotions, and you can't speak out then.
Absolutely.
Sooner or later, you have to have courage. So overall, what do you see as the overall solution to this problem, to stop this insanity, and that you hope really the Speak Louder campus tour really helps put out there?
Well, I think what we need to see, specifically in regard to the issue of men and women's sports, I think what we need to see, outside of just kind of the basic response of leadership stepping up, which of course, I mean, that's every realm we need to see that happening. But what we as women and female athletes can do and should do up at this point is boycott these events where men are competing. Don't compete, concede. I've pledged any woman who is faced against a man in any sport or any competition or any event that's strictly for women, And if this woman loses out on prize money, I have pledged I will pay the prize money that this woman is losing out on, because we have to incentivize people fighting back. We have to incentivize these sacrifices that are being made, which I know is easier said than done. Of course it is. I competed against this man. I didn't back down, or I didn't, concede, but now if I was faced with this, I certainly would. So that's what I think we need to see in regard to that topic specifically. We need to see parents who are willing to defend their daughters and teach their sons masculinity. At that, we need more strong men. And we just, like I said, we need people to be unafraid. I shouldn't say unafraid. I don't think that's a good word. And I think that's something that's pretty commonly done, actually, is people conflate being fearless with courageousness. They're two different things. Of course, being unafraid or being fearless is lacking fear, but courage is looking fear in the eyes and still doing the right thing. So I shouldn't say we need people who are unafraid. We need people who are courageous. I think that's the most admirable virtue of them all. It's the most lacking virtue of them all, is courage.
And
So
it certainly
that's what we
is,
need to
especially
do.
in the sports world, because in the sports world, you have a condensed timeline because, the older
Yeah.
you get, the more difficult things become, and the more you begin to slow down and go in reverse. So you only have limited time as an athlete. You could always be a college professor. You can't always be an Olympic star swimmer. You can't always be the best golfer or the best boxer. So it's actually even more courage for them to speak out, athletic people to speak out against this monstrosity. And do you think that some pressure has built on these governing institutions of the sports world that we may begin to see them reconsider their policies and stop this horrific practice?
Definitely. I believe the public pressure now is becoming inevitable. Organizations like the NCAA or like the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, or even the Biden administration, the public pressure is there. And like I said, this is a winning issue. To ignore the voices and the demands of female athletes, which females make up more than 50% of society. So to ignore the demands of us in hopes to appease less than 0.5% of the population, that is not what a democracy is. And they will very quickly realize that if they continue to go down this path. We've already seen some change within some of these smaller, more niche sports. For example, jiu-jitsu, they allowed men to get on the mat with women, unbeknownst to women entirely, that they would be fighting and grappling with these men. 4 girls, there was a tournament in Georgia, and 4 of these women said, I'm not competing. And 21 hours later, NAGA, which is the National Grappling Association, ended up changing their policies to prevent this from happening moving forward. It shows you that public pressure is real and public pressure works. It is our job. We can't expect, what a naive thing to expect people to do the right thing.
Riley, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak on these matters. The Speak Louder campus tour, you're going to see links to the website to go to the event page. You'll be able to see where she's coming to a college near you. Make sure you see her speak. And it is sponsored by the Leadership Institute. Riley, pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, thank you so much.